Thank you. You can have a seat. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to Exodus chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16. If you don't have, that's fine. The verses will be on the screen. It's it's just as singing that song and just thinking and praying. Jesus is a powerful name. It is the most powerful name. And there's enough power in that name to lead us to a place of rest in our lives. In 1967, a little restaurant in the Atlanta area opened. You may have heard of it. It was called Chick-fil-A.
Woo!
Yeah,
Oh,
that's right. Truett Cathy was the founder. He's a devout Christian. And when he started this business, he made a very difficult business decision, and that is to commit to always being closed on Sunday, much to my chagrin. Because have you ever, who likes Chick-fil-A? Does everyone like Chick-fil-A? If you don't like Chick-fil-A, you just get up and walk out right now. This church is not for you. No. But I love Chick-fil-A, and I never love Chick-fil-A more than on a Sunday. It's like I never crave it more than when it's Sunday. And it always seems to happen that we're taking family vacation or something, and we're traveling on a Sunday. I'm like, I want Chick-fil-A to stop at Chick-fil-A for lunch so bad. And inevitably, there's the sign for Chick-fil-A. You pull in, and it's like a ghost town. You're like, oh no, it's Sunday. Tim Hawkins, a comedian, even has a song called Chick-fil-A. You should go Google it. It's funny. I won't sing it for you because I'm not good at that singing type stuff. But it's really good. And he even talks about what a cruel trick it is to play to be closed on Sunday, because then you have to settle for Subway. And so Truett Cathy made this very difficult business decision to close his doors on Sundays. And when he first started his restaurant business, he was working so many hours that he would fall asleep sitting right beside the grill in the restaurant. And they had a gravel driveway back then, and when cars would pull into the gravel parking lot, it would wake him up, and he'd wake up real quick and fire the grill up again and get ready to start cooking for customers. So Chick-fil-A only being in operation for 6 days a week has to do with giving his employees a better work and life balance. But it's not by accident that the day that he chose to be closed was on Sunday, because he wanted to give himself and his employees the opportunities to go worship God if they so choose. Now, there's something interesting. Chick-fil-A is closed 52 more days per year than any other fast food restaurant for the most part, right? Every other fast food restaurant is open 52 Sundays a year. Chick-fil-A, however, is not. Despite that, 2 years ago, they generated $8 billion in sales over the past year. That's $2 billion more than their closest chicken rival, Kentucky Fried Chicken. And KFC has double the number of stores and is open 52 days more per year than Chick-fil-A is. So to say that Chick-fil-A is killing it is an understatement. And so they have all these things that you think would go against them for making money. In fact, they're the most profitable food chain in the United States per store. Per store, they get more revenue than any other food chain in the States. And besides that, they're the favorite food chain in most states. Here's the map. This is from Foursquare. This is a map of every state in the country and what the favorite fast food restaurant is in that state. And you can see that Chick-fil-A is every bit of 2/3 of the country, probably more than that if you're going by the number of the states. I didn't count it up. But that's a lot. So they're doing something right. And Truett Cathy took a step of faith to decide that, you know what? I am going to make rest a priority for me, for my employees, for my equipment, for everything. We are going to take the time to rest. Now, does working less automatically mean you'll have huge success? Does it automatically mean that in your life you're going to have Chick-fil-A type success? Maybe not. It may not mean that. But Chick-fil-A does prove one thing. It proves that it can be done if it's done right. I think for a lot of us in our lives, we believe the lie that if we take time to stop and rest, we won't be as productive, things won't get done, and we're just going to make our lives worse. Does anyone else ever feel that way? All the time. Does anyone else find yourself stopping your work, stopping working for the week, stopping doing what's on your mind, only to find that all you can do is focus on what you're not doing rather than just resting? Does anyone else have that trouble? Yeah, all the time. That's me. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at finding rest from work this week. We're looking at finding rest from work. Turn with me in Exodus chapter 16. We're going to start in verse 2. This is going to be a long read, so hang with me, okay? I usually don't read this long of a passage of Scripture at once, but I think it's important for us to hear the whole story. So Exodus 16, starting in verse 2. The entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into the wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I am going to rain bread from heaven for you." That's a weird thing. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. This way I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "This evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the Lord's glory, because he has heard your complaints about him. For who are we that you complain about us?" Moses continued, "The Lord will give you meat to eat this evening, and all the bread you want in the morning, for he has heard the complaints that you are raising against him. Who are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints.'" As Aaron was speaking to the entire Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud the Lord's glory appeared. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." So at the evening quail came and covered the camp. In the morning there was a layer of dew all around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated, there were fine flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, "What is it?" because they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each person needs to eat. You may gather 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of people each of you has in his tent." So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a lot, some a little. When they measured it by quarts, the person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered a little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. And Moses said to them, "No one is to let any of it remain until morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some of them left part of it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank. Therefore Moses was angry with them. They gathered it every morning. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the 6th day they gathered twice as much food, 4 quarts apiece, and all the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He told them, "This is what God has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil, and set aside everything left over to be kept until morning." I guess if they're boiling it, they're making bagels probably, right? I mean, that's what I'm guessing. That's, in my mind, it's bagels. So they set it aside until morning, as Moses commanded, and it didn't stink or have maggots in it. Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you won't find any in the field. For 6 days you will gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none." Yet on the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they did not find any. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands and instructions? Understand that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he will give you 2 days' worth of bread. Each of you stay where you are. No one is to leave his place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. That's a lot to read. Did you get it all on the first try? I'm not going to read it again. All right, we won't do that. But I do want to look at a few things. We see some examples of what rest is and what rest isn't on this. And the first thing, and we talked about this briefly last week, is that rest is a gift. Rest is a gift from God. Look at verse 29 again. Verse 29 says this. It says, understand that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Boom, right there. God gave the people of Israel the Sabbath. He gave them the rest. In fact, Mark chapter 2, verse 27, 28, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and says, then he told them, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. So then the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. So rest is given as a gift. Now, here's the thing. I think a lot of us look at rest as a burden. As weird as that sound and as oxymoronic as that sound, I don't know if that's even a word, but it is now. But, that doesn't seem to make sense. But I think rest is a burden for a lot of us. We don't look at it as a gift. We look at it as something that we have to do. Like, we're just like, oh, I got to stop. Oh, I got to spend time with family. Oh, I got to go to church. Like, there's all these I have to's. There's never I get to. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, we have this attitude towards rest a lot of times, like, man, if I could prefer it, I'd just keep going. I just keep going and keep going and keep going. But God designed you and I. And He made our bodies, He made our minds, He made our souls. He knows exactly how we tick because He's the architect of us. And He knows exactly what we need. It's kind of like having children. Like as your children grow up, there's certain choices you don't give them. Like you don't allow your children to have the choice whether they're going to play in the middle of Ridge Avenue or not. That's not a choice you give your kids because they don't know better. They don't know what's best for them. But you, as their parent, as the one who's come before them, knows exactly what's right for them. And you know it's not right to have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, even a 10-year-old playing in the middle. That's not good for anyone playing in the middle of Ridge Avenue. I see adults doing it all the time, but that's their business. But my kids, they don't play in the middle of Ridge Avenue because I know that they will get killed because I've seen how people drive in Philadelphia. That's it. That's the end of their lives. And it's the same way for us. God knows what's best for us. We don't always think that. Like, I know sometimes my kids will get mad at me because I'm telling them that they can't do something or they have to do something because I know what's best. I know what's healthy. I know what's safe. I know what's wrong. I know all those things. And they don't realize it. And they don't like when I try to give them something that's good for them because they don't know it's good for them. And I feel like that's how we treat rest a lot of times. Instead of viewing rest as a gift, we view it as a restriction on our lives. But it's not a restriction. It's a gracious gift from a God who loves you and who wants you to thrive, who wants you to have an abundant life. Not a life filled with anxiety and stress and weariness. He wants you to enjoy rest. It's not meant to be a burden. If it is a burden, then we're getting it all wrong. So the first thing that some of us might need to do is we might need to flip a switch on our head and start to change our thinking about rest. It's not something to keep us from reaching our goals. It's not something to hold us back in life, to keep us from reaching the next level, to keep us from being the most successful person we can be. It's something that God has given us in order to enhance our lives and to enhance whatever it is He's called us to do. So rest is a gift. The second thing is this. Rest requires preparation. Rest requires preparation. Verses 21 through 23 says this. They gathered it on every morning. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much food, 4 quarts apiece. And all the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He told them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Today is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, boil what you want to boil, and set aside everything left over to keep it until morning. So, rest isn't something that you just stumble upon. It's not something that just happened. There's preparation made for this rest. God planned out this rest for His people. He didn't just say, oh, you know what? You've been gathering this manna all week long. You probably just take a day off. No, there was preparations made for it. He told them ahead of time, you're going to have to work. It's interesting. You can't have rest unless you work. Right? If you're not working, the rest isn't that big of a deal to you, right? But they're working all week. They're wandering in the wilderness. They're kind of having a tough life. A lot of us have tough lives. A lot of us feel like we're wandering around in the wilderness. A lot of us work every day of the week. We go to school. We're trying to get ahead. We're trying to just provide for our families. And because we have work, we can have rest. But that work is a preparation that we have to do to be able to rest in the first place. Our preparation plus God's provision equals rest. I'll say that again. Your preparation plus God's provision equals rest. You see, God gave them extra work to do on the sixth day. He gave them work to do all week long, 5 days. On the sixth day, He gave them extra work to do. But what did He also give them on the sixth day? He gave them double what they needed. He gave them 2 days worth of food. So that on the seventh day, when there was nothing there for them to have, they'd have plenty of food. And what else did they do? They said bake the bread, boil the bread, whatever you need to do, store it away. Keep it safe. Keep it ready for your day of rest. I have a pastor friend. I used to attend his church in Lancaster. And anytime I would get together with him, it was a big church. He's a really, really well-known theologian. At one point, he was president of a seminary. And just a brilliant guy. There's a lot of demand. I say there's a lot of demands on his time. And I was always very grateful when I got time with him because I knew there were a lot of demands on his time. And it was a big deal for him to give up an hour to spend with me and talk with me. And so I would always say, look, Dr. Miller, thank you so much for giving up an hour of your time for me. I know you're a busy guy. And he would always, and I didn't understand the time, but he'd always say, I work really hard not to be busy. I work really hard not to be busy. And for years, I had no clue what that was supposed to mean. I just kind of laughed at it because I was like, well, I'm going to laugh at him because I respect him, but I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But I get it now. Like on the time when you're supposed to work hard. Work diligently. Work fervently. Be your best. Do your best. Don't stop. Don't stop and take breaks. Don't stop and rest when you're supposed to be working. But don't work when you're supposed to be resting. Do you understand? But if you work hard on the days that you're supposed to work hard, then you don't have stuff hanging over you on your days of rest. This is something that I'm really guilty of. Sometimes, it's kind of old saying, I was going to join the Procrastinators Anonymous Club, but I decided to wait till next week. Right? You ever heard that? Like, that's my life's motto right there. Like, I love to procrastinate. Why do today what you can put off till tomorrow? Right? And I think that's the way a lot of us look at life. Like, man, and sometimes you feel tired. Like, I'm just going to get to that later. Or I just need a little 5-minute break or a little 10-minute break, or I know I'm going to take today off. Whatever it is. We take all these little breaks, or we just kind of half-heart our work and life, whatever that work may be, whether it's raising kids or working in the corporate world or whatever it is you're doing. Maybe it's working for God and volunteering. Maybe it's being a student. You just kind of half-heart your way through things, and then what happens? Come the weekend or come the last day, man, you got all this backlog of stuff that has to get done. And so you spend time that should be set aside for rest doing work that you could have done Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday. Does that make sense? Anyone else? You don't have to raise a hand. You don't have to admit that. But I do. I do that sometimes. I do that a lot of times, actually. It's something that I struggle with. But rest requires preparation. If you haven't prepared adequately during the week, you won't be prepared to rest at the end of the week whenever you set aside time to rest. I know this really catches up to me. There's some times during the week where I don't get time to maybe prep my sermon the way I like, right? Or there's other things that I put off. And then what happens on Saturday, man, I'm finishing prepping, or I'm finishing doing other things. Like I prep my sermon, but I put other things off. And I just didn't put in the full time that I need to each and every day. And sometimes you can't help it. Like I understand, there's sometimes that stuff comes up, right? Sometimes the kids get sick, and you spend half a day at the doctor's offices and getting them medicine and getting them Gatorade and making chicken soup and taking care of them, and all of a sudden you get behind on work. So that stuff happens. Man, if you prepare during the week or prepare during the month, whatever time you have set aside to rest, then you can fully enjoy your rest. Third thing is this: rest does not happen apart from God. Rest doesn't happen apart from God. Verse 23 again, it says, He told them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. A holy Sabbath to the Lord. I think where we get wrong on rest a lot of times, and man, I've told several people this week, preparing this sermon series has been really convicting to me. Like, I struggle. I realize that I'm going through this and I'm studying, I'm reading God's Word. I struggle with so many different aspects of what biblical rest really looks like. Like, I just confess to you as your pastor, I don't do this well. So don't think I got this all figured out. I'm telling you what God's telling me and what He's starting to do in my life. And that's, okay, so that's just being real. And so I realize that this doesn't happen apart from God. I think a lot of times we get to like a Saturday or a Sunday or our vacation or whatever time we have set aside to rest, and that is all about me. Like, that day of rest is nothing but mine. And I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm not going to do what I don't want to do. You know, I'm not going to talk to who I don't want to talk to. It's all consumed with me. You know, whether it's a day of golf, if you like to go to the spa, it's a day at the spa. If it's just sitting on the couch and watching TV or sports. Like, I used to be really bad about this. Huge sports fan. I've told you guys this before. I'm a huge sports fan. And I love University of Tennessee football. I love the Eagles football. But University of Tennessee, especially on Saturday, that was kind of like my rest. Like, I get to watch the football game, and we'd be out. And I used to get irritated if we were doing something as a family and it was going to cut into my time of watching a Tennessee football game. Right? That's like a really jerky thing to be. Like, I was a jerk. That's just the way it is. And so, but it's a really jerky thing to do. But I did. And here's the thing. That was like my time, my rest. And the problem with that is mine. It was all self-centered. There was no focus on God. There's no focus on serving and loving other people. It was just all about me. And I think that's the way a lot of us look at rest. It's our time. That's my time. That's no one else's time. And it's definitely not God's time. And God said, no, this is a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So let me just give you something. When you take time to rest, there needs to be time during your rest dedicated to God. There needs to be time during your rest that is dedicated to God. In fact, I would encourage you to begin your rest dedicating it to God, like the front end of your rest dedicated to God instead of any other time. Because if you're like me, the more you rest, the lazier you get. The lazier you get, the less chance there is that you're going to spend time with God or anyone else for that matter. Does that make sense? You smell what I'm stepping in? But so maybe you spend time reading the Bible. You spend a little time just getting to God's Word and read that. Maybe you spend time in prayer, praying to God, just being still to God, listening to Him. Spend time worshiping God. Listen, you can do this all day on your day of rest. Listen to worship music. Listen to Christian music. Like, I love all kinds. Like, country music's probably the only music I really don't like. And even then, I like the old stuff. But like, I love all kinds of music. It doesn't matter what it is, secular, Christian, whatever you want to call it. I love it all. I love music. But man, there's something about listening to music that has words that point our hearts and our souls and our minds to God, that really helps us focus. And I've noticed, if I'll take time and have more Christian music in my life on a regular basis, my attitude, my heart, the direction that I'm going, my focus, really seems to be affected by that. And so if you're going to take time to rest, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday or a time of vacation, begin that rest by focusing your heart and your mind on God. And that's what a lot of you are doing here today. I praise God for each and every one. Look, it is a nasty, humid day outside. It's even more humid inside, which is one of the advantages of being part of a church plant. You get building without AC, and you get to sweat off all the extra weight you don't like. So praise God for that. But look, it's a holiday weekend. You could be anywhere else, but you're here. And you're beginning this day of rest by focusing on God. So rest doesn't happen apart from God. Next, rest is an act of faith. We mentioned this last week. Rest is an act of faith. So what happened is God told them to gather enough just for what they needed. And don't leave any left over to the next day. And what happened? They were scared, right? They were going hungry. And so the first day where they go and gather, and they gather a ton of it. And they have some, they keep some for the next day. And what happened? They got maggots in it, and it started stinking, right? So they had to trust that when God was saying He was going to provide every day, that He would indeed provide every day. Like, they went out and they didn't listen to Him. And then they went out to gather when they were supposed to be resting. right? Like a lot of times we rest when we're supposed to be working, and we work when we're supposed to be resting. Why? Because we don't have faith that God can use rest in our lives to make us productive. We don't have faith that everything that we told ourselves needs to be done, or that society tells ourselves needs to be accomplished, we don't have faith that that can be done if we actually stop and rest the way God's designed our bodies and our minds to rest. See, it says that God tested them to see if they would obey, to see if they trusted Him. And my question for you, my question for me is, do you really trust God enough to actually rest? Or do you think that your world's going to fall apart if you stop working for one day? Or you stop working for 1 week? And listen, that's a hard question. That's not an easy one to answer. If I'm going to be honest, most days, I feel like the world's going to fall apart if I stop to rest. And even when I'm resting, I'm thinking about something else. But God calls us into faith in Him. Faith always leads to obedience. And sometimes being obedience looks like not doing much of anything at all. Isn't that weird? Isn't that kind of counterintuitive to everything that we've been taught as Americans? Land of the free, home of the brave, place of opportunity, right? Work hard and you'll step up that ladder. You'll have a great life for your family. Don't stop working though. No, you can't do that. Not in America. But God says, yes, have faith in me. You know, there's two ways that some of these people didn't trust in God in this story. They gathered more than He said to during the week, and then they go out to gather more on the day of rest. Faith's required because their experience said that they keep the stuff overnight, it'll stink, right? The first time they tried keeping it overnight, it started stinking and maggots grew. But then all of a sudden, 5 days later, God says, no, gather enough and keep it overnight. You understand where they had like a little confusion there? Like a little trust issue? It's like, if I put my hand on a hot stove and burn it really bad, after you told me not to put it on a hot stove, I'm like, oh man, I should have listened. They were right. That was awful. But then you say, go ahead and put your hand on the hot stove. It's the 6th day of the week. It's okay. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that again. So you kind of understand where they're like, but we have to take God at His word, no matter what our experience tells us, no matter what worldly wisdom tells us, no matter what we feel like. It's up to us to have faith and to take God at His word. 2 more things real quick and I'll wrap it up. And Yanni, you can come on back up and begin to play. Rest by faith happens. I don't think there's enough slide for this, Gracie, but rest by faith happens when we are dependent on God. We can rest by faith when we are dependent on God. Verses 2 and 3 says this again. The entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into this wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger. Now, they were losing sight of the God that delivered them from Israel. Their faith was failing, but they were in a place where they were going to starve to death if God didn't come through and provide food for them. And providing food for them, God didn't just provide them food, He provided them a day of rest. They didn't have to worry about where their food was coming from. He gave them food every morning. The job He gave them was to go out and gather the food and eat it. And then He gave them 1 day of rest. They were completely dependent on God to provide what they needed to live one more day. In a very real, legitimate way, like starvation. Not in a way like, oh no, my laundry's going to be piled up if I don't get it done today. Or, oh no, I'm not going to get the promotion at work if I don't put in a few more hours. Not in that type of way, and my kid's going to die type of way. They were dependent on God. And that's when God introduced them to the idea of rest. Look, you and I are never going to find true rest until we're dependent on God. We say, man, God, I am bankrupt without you in my life. All my work means nothing without you. Having all the money in the world means nothing without you. Having the best home and the most loving child in the world means nothing without you. Being the best student, being the best employee, the best father, the best mother, the best brother or sister or son or daughter. It means nothing without you. Only when we're completely dependent on God can we truly find rest. And there's only one way you can be completely dependent on God, and that's through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ died on the cross to give you and I rest from our sins, to give us forgiveness from our sins. You see, we've all sinned. We've all broken God's moral law. And because of that, we have to be punished. And because of that, we try to be good people. We try to be the best and say, oh, I'm better than most people. I'm trying to be good enough, God. I'm really trying. And God said, stop trying and start trusting in me and in Jesus Christ and what I've done to you. That's where you find rest. Ultimate rest. Not just rest from your work, but rest for your soul. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. But if you've never done that, and I encourage you to do that today. Don't let today go by without finding rest in Jesus Christ. And maybe you have found that rest, but you live your life as if you haven't. Take that step of faith. Be intentional. Plan. Prepare. And rest. Work hard. Man, work really hard. Work harder than you've ever worked before. But man, when you take time off, when you find that Sabbath rest, whenever you schedule that in your life, whatever that looks like, man, rest harder than you've ever rested before, because you're going to rest in God. You're not going to rest in yourself. I pray that you can do that. I pray that this helps you. The way it's challenging me and helping me, it's changing my life. Like right now, it's changing my life. And I pray that this truth will change your life. Let's pray. God, we love you so much. Lord, we thank you that you provide everything we need. God, you provide jobs, you provide food, clothing. God, you provide work for us so that we could go out and work hard. But God, you don't just provide work for us, you provide rest from our labor. And God, I pray that we learn to rest well. God, that we learn that when we prepare, you'll provide. And God, that you provide no matter what. And God, that we learn to dedicate our rest to you. That our rest is to you. God, it's not to us. You've given it for us to rejuvenate us. But it's to you. Lord, help us to focus on you when we rest, not on ourselves. And God, help us to trust you, that our world won't fall apart when we take time to stop and acknowledge you and who you are. God, change our hearts today. Change our lives. God, I pray that for someone in this room today who's not trusted Jesus Christ, who's not found rest for their souls, God, rest from their sin, rest from their trying, have not found salvation in Jesus Christ, I pray that today is the day that they'll do that. We love you and praise, sings, and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.